wouldn't work at the number one ranked company, OpenAI. I'll tell you why. But first, a quick recap. CNBC just published its list of the Disruptor 50 companies for 2024. I'll put the links to all the sources in the description. But the CNBC list is biased towards the interest of investors and founders, not regular employees. So take its hype with a grain of salt. Companies participate in these reports because they want to attract the best talent. And it works. There are a lot of people trying to get into these companies. So should you? I myself have worked at startups that went IPO. I even worked for a company in the CNBC list. So I'll provide my perspective based on my experience and my research, and I hope it helps you. But why work at a disruptive company in the first place? Disruptive companies can be good for career growth because there's fewer processes and people, and it means there's faster career growth for self-motivated and self-directed people. The companies are more focused because they aren't chasing way too many things. And then you get a chance at making great money through an IPO, and the IPO itself is fun. But why not work at one of these disruptive companies? You'll almost certainly have poor work-life balance. Fewer processes and people also means there's always more work to do than people to do it. Most of these companies have technical founders and they value technical people the most. If you're not an engineer or at least technical, you're probably going to be treated as a second-class citizen. There's a lot of risk that an even better technology may come along or investments may not pan out. You'll have to adapt very quickly. So here are the top 5 companies ranked by CNBC. You've got OpenAI, number 1, Anduril, number 2, Stripe, number 3, Brex, number 4, and Databricks at number 5. Now, in addition to the CNBC report, I also looked at other sources, including review sites Glassdoor and Blind, to figure out what's really going on at these companies. Now, later in this video, I'll do a very thorough comparison across all of these, CNBC, Glassdoor, Blind, and I'll even provide my own perspective about which of these companies are worth joining, so you don't make a big mistake. Okay, let's take a look at OpenAI. Now, a quick overview of OpenAI. It was founded by Sam Altman. He's very famous in Silicon Valley with Y Combinator and a few other startups. Greg Brockman, Ilya Sutskever, notable in the AI space. Elon Musk, everybody knows Elon. It was launched in 2015. It's headquartered in San Francisco, has a funding of $11.3 billion and a valuation of $86 billion. Wow, that's a sky-high valuation. Now, OpenAI builds AI systems, mostly focused on LLMs for both consumers as well as enterprises. What's notable about OpenAI relationship with Microsoft. Microsoft is a partner, it's an investor, and it's a competitor building its own AI products and language models. So let's take the Glassdoor rating of OpenAI. At 4.3, this is a good rating. 82% would recommend them to a friend. 100% approve of Sam Altman. But do remember that this is a very small sample size because there are few employees at OpenAI and even fewer that do public ratings. Let's take a look at Blind for OpenAI. The techies rate this even higher. But again, remember that the sample size is very small. What's notable here is work-life balance is the only thing that's under the 4.0 score. But then again, if you're joining one of these companies, work-life balance is something you should not count on. So what's good at OpenAI? High compensation, especially if you're an AI researcher, you're going to get paid the big bucks. Some talk about $1 million base compensation. You have a sense of mission. This is a very, very hot area right now. The CEO approval is sky high. You have lots of great technical talent, and there's a lot of great product growth. But what about the bad, of course, or work-life balance that's on the resource teams, as I'm sure they're scrambling to race ahead. Quiet firing seems to be an issue where they don't necessarily have mass layoffs, but people are either pushed out of the company or leave. Now, the co-founder, Ilya, was critical to the company, and this is concerning to me because if you know what happened with OpenAI, he's also a member of the board, and he pushed out Sam the first time around. Of course, that all backfired and Sam came back. But my guess is that that left some bad blood between people at OpenAI, and this points to some kind of turmoil at the top. Non-technical talent is an issue at OpenAI, which basically means people who are not technical feel that the management there and the people there might not be as good. And then it's very bottoms up. which can be good for some people, but for others, they're looking for direction from the managers and from those higher up on what to do. So it seems like a very self-directed place. Now, would I work at OpenAI? The answer is no, and that's the thumbs down. Why? Well, the valuation is already sky high. It's at $86 billion. And I'll talk about valuations and employee counts and things like that at the end of the video. I just don't understand the sustainable advantage that OpenAI has. Transformers, which are the main innovation at OpenAI, were actually invented at Google. Now, yes, Google had been asleep and they were tied up with bureaucracy. But I think what has happened is that OpenAI has shown the world what can really be done. And now it's woken the sleeping giant at Google. Google also has great talent, and Google has the data with things like search, with things like YouTube, that all power AI and LLMs in particular. And they also have big products, Gmail, Google Workspaces, that they can integrate AI with. So with all these advantages, I just fail to see what big competitive moat and differentiation that OpenAI has. And then lastly, with the co-founder departure, that points to things not really going well at the top. In this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. It will help this small channel reach more people who can benefit from this too. Okay, next up, Anduril. Quick overview of Anduril. It was founded by Brian Schimpf and some other co-founders as well in 2017. Now, Brian does also have a technical background. He founded Oculus VR previously, which was acquired by Facebook for $2 billion. It's headquartered in Costa Mesa, California, funded at $2.3 billion and valued at $10 billion. Anduril develops advanced defense technology and AI-powered security solutions, and it's modeled after Silicon Valley startups. It's interesting and notable that it funds its own R&D, unlike the traditional defense industry, and it's VC-backed. So let's take a look at the Glassdoor ratings for Anduril. It's rated at 3.9, which is an okay overall rating, and 87% rating for the CEO, so good rating for the CEO. It's interesting here because traditionally, aerospace and defense industries have an average rating of about 3.5, and tech and IT companies have about a 3.9 rating, the good ones. And so Anduril is actually more closely aligned with a good IT and tech company, and that's what they're trying to do here, bring that whole tech experience to these traditional aerospace and defense companies. And you can see which Blind, which is more tech-oriented, has an even higher rating at 4.3. So that means techies do like generally what's happening at Anduril. Of course, as usual, work-life balance is an issue. So Anduril, the good. Overall compensation is good. People talk about having a nice office environment. You work with smart people. There's opportunities for career growth. And what's interesting in this one, compared to some of the others, it's noted as being family friendly with things like holidays and so on, which often you don't get at these smaller or disruptive tech companies. Now, what's bad at Anduril? It's very disorganized at lower levels, according to many reviews. That's problematic management. In fact, one of these quotes is that it's horribly unqualified management, at least for the manufacturing and mechanical teams. There's no remote work, so you have to be in the office. Women, minorities can feel out of place with underrepresentation of women and minorities. And then lastly, it's building warfare products. So if you're working at Anduril, you have to be comfortable with that fact. Now, what's my verdict on Anduril as a company? Well, my verdict is a maybe. And why? Well, its valuation isn't crazy high, so that's important. It seems to have a reasonable competitive moat in which it's bringing top technical talent from Silicon Valley companies and using Silicon Valley style and processes to build products quickly and effectively. And then it seems to have a good balance between career growth and life balance. Of course, work-life balance is not great, but it seems to find a good middle ground. Okay, let's talk about Stripe. Quick overview of Stripe. Its founders, Patrick Collison and John Collison, are brothers originally from Ireland. They also have a technical background, founded another company previously. It was launched in 2010, headquartered in San Francisco, funding at $2.2 billion and valuation, again, pretty high at $65 billion. Stripe provides online payment processing and financial infrastructure for businesses. Now, when you use a shopping cart online, chances are that Stripe is the company powering that. In fact, what's notable is it's surpassed $1 trillion in payment volume. That's 25% year over growth and is actually cash flow positive. This is important for a company because that means it can meet all of its obligations with the cash that it's generating. And it's not at risk of having to raise more money either through private or public offerings. Let's take a look at the Glassdoor ratings for Stripe. Got a 3.6, which is actually below average. And even the CEO rating at 73% is below what is typical for a good company. Now, this is actually higher than the ratings for financial services companies, which are about 3.5, but they're lower than ratings for but they're lower than ratings for typical technology companies. What do the techies at Blind say about Stripe? Well, they actually rate this at a bit lower than the rest of the folks. And that's a little concerning given that it's already a lower score. You can see a number of the scores closer to the 3 mark than the 4 mark. So what's good at Stripe that people talk about? The coworkers, good compensation, you can do impactful work, it's an innovative environment, and you get remote flexibility. And in this day and age, with a lot of companies pushing everybody to be back in the office a lot, that's good to offer that as a perk. What's bad at Stripe? Well, there's poor work-life balance. People talk about a toxic performance culture, and they talk about it taking its cue primarily from Oracle and Amazon. If you're familiar with the culture at Amazon, they have what's called a performance improvement plan culture. There's a lot of pressure on managers to put folks in a ranking system and put the lowest ones on a performance plan. Many people say that's sort of a quiet firing technique to push people out of the company, the lowest tier performers. Now, if that's not for you, you probably shouldn't join a company like Stripe. Middle management is ineffective and subpar. Well, there's several comments about that. People complain about priority and frequency of work changes, and people complain about limited career growth, which I'm not too surprised about because it's a pretty big company already. What's my verdict? I wouldn't work at Stripe. Its valuation's already very high. It's got a reasonable competitive moat, but it's a little bit too big for growth experience, in my opinion. Okay, next company. Let's take a look at Brex. Quick overview of Brex. Its founders, Henrique and Pedro, came from Brazil originally. They also have a technical background and had started a company previously in Brazil. Brex was launched in 2017. It's headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah, funded at $1.4 billion and valued at $12.3 billion. Brex provides Brex provide corporate credit cards and financial services for startups and businesses. What's notable that I saw with Brex is it cut 20% of its workforce in January, so it's been through some serious restructuring. Now, what does Glassdoor say about Brex? 3.9 rating overall and CEO rating of 74%. So an okay rating is about par for a good tech company. Now, what do the techies say at Blind about Brex? It's got a 4.1 rating, so this is actually higher than the Glassdoor rating. And if you're a techie, that's a good sign. That means on average, technical folks likely like this company more than the general population. What's good at Brex? You get great colleagues, good compensation, challenging and impactful work, you get remote work, and you get growth opportunities at Brex as well. What's bad at Brex? As common with these companies, poor work-life balance, management is inconsistent, has zero compassion. There's been frequent layoffs. There's been 3 different sets of layoffs in the past few years. People talk about a toxic political culture in some departments. I don't think this is in all departments, but in very particular departments, somebody has talked about this and the toll on mental health, including crying, throwing up before work. It has a bit of a weak competitive mode. Okay, so what's my verdict on Brex? Brex is a maybe. Its valuation is not sky high, but there is an intensifying competition in this market, and it's unclear whether Brex moat is sustainable enough. And the management and culture seems like a bit of a mixed bag to me. Hey, Databricks. Quick overview of Databricks. It's founded by Ali Ghodsi, Matej Zaharia, Reynold, Ian, and a few others. Its founders are very technical. They are originally academics, PhDs from the University of Berkeley. Launched in 2013, headquartered in San Francisco. funded at around $4 billion and valued at around $43 billion. Now, Databricks might not be the flashiest of the group, but just as people made money in the gold rush era selling picks and shovels, Databricks wants to provide the picks and shovels in the data and AI era. What's notable at Databricks, it's already at a revenue at $1.6 billion, so not a small company. Now, let's take a look at the Glassdoor ratings for Databricks. Yeah, it's got a Glassdoor rating of 4.3 and approval rating of 93% for the CEO. So great overall rating and CEO rating as well. Now, let's take a look at the blind ratings for Databricks. That's interesting here. The techies actually rate this lower than the Glassdoor ratings. I find that a little strange, given that Databricks is a tech company. I suspect what has happened is that over time, things have changed somewhat as the company has grown. And also, for techies, they're probably more focused on the next white hot things, such as pure play AI companies. It's interesting here that career growth is a big issue at Databricks. Only Stripe is actually worse in career growth. Okay, so what's good at Databricks? It's got excellent engineering talent, good culture, customer adoption and growth is great. It's got transparent leadership. People talk about, from the very top at least, that leaders communicate openly and honestly. And it's got strong CEO approval. What's bad about Databricks? Well, the base pay seems to be generally about half a level below other big tech companies. So if you're at another FANG company, say at an L6, you can expect like a L5.5 or so base pay rate. Of course, the companies will all tell you that you will be handsomely rewarded by the stock. But remember, that's all paper money. Its long-term viability is unclear. With how fast things are moving in AI, Databricks definitely wants a piece of it. It does have a shot, but it's unclear how the market's going to go. And then on top of that, all of the big cloud vendors have database solutions, analytical solutions. Databricks has done well in competing so far, but it's unclear in the long term if it can sustain that in a profitable manner. The non-engineering organizations can be a hit or a miss. Here, there's a quote that does clear segregation of R&D versus non-R&D, and that'll give you feelings of inferiority. It's got poor work-life balance, but that's about par for all of these companies. And there's some quiet firing going on. Databricks will say that they have not done mass layoffs, and while that's true, there have been targeted cuts of certain departments and people pushed out of the company. It's very top-down and hierarchical, so very top-heavy, a lot of decision documents, hard to get things done. So what's my verdict? Maybe. The valuation is high. It has a reasonable competitive moat, but long-term sustainability is unclear. And for my taste, it's a little too big already. Now let's compare the CNBC ranking with that of Glassdoor and Blind. Okay, so now you see the Glassdoor rankings, and we see the Blind rankings as well. How do they look side by side? Well, you can see that Stripe actually jumps from third to last place in reviews provided by actual employees. And you see Databricks actually bumps up a little bit, and the rest is a bit of a mix and match between them as well. But what about my perspectives? Now, here I've listed the CNBC Disruptor 50. I've given my rating on whether I would join the company or not. Thumbs up is a yes. There's no thumbs up here. Maybe is a sideways, and no is a thumbs down. I've listed the estimated number of employees for every company. I've also listed the company valuations, and then I've done a calculation on the valuation per employee. Let's talk a little bit about this and why that's important. So, my ratings are driven by the potential compensation and career growth. These companies' valuations are already too high, in my opinion. They want high valuations so that they can raise more capital by selling smaller equity stakes to investors and also make employees feel really good about their paper money. Remember, it's not real money yet. By comparison, valuations for the biggest profitable tech companies, such as Google and Microsoft, are around $10 million per employee. So a lot of these companies are approaching this valuation per employee metric of the most profitable companies in tech. And OpenAI just blows past all of that through the water. And again, this is one of the key reasons I would not myself join OpenAI, especially if I was just focused on the chance of a big payday. Now, Is it possible OpenAI will eventually meet those lofty high expectations? It's not impossible, but the chances are very slim. And I don't like those odds. But what about career growth? Well, most of these companies are at the 1,000 employees or even a lot more. Some of these, sometimes people call these startup companies, but they're not startups. And these companies, especially the larger ones, you'll have a lot of the same issues you had at a large public company. My recommendation is to join companies well under the $10 billion valuation, and ideally under the $1 billion unicorn status valuation for a real pre IPO company experience. Does this mean you shouldn't join any of these companies? No, not really. Here's a quick reason you might want to join any one of these companies. OpenAI. You're an AI researcher and you want the high base comp and the brand on your resume. Anduril. You're in hardware or mechanical engineering and you want a company with Silicon Valley compensation and perks. Stripe and Brex. You want to stay in fintech and there's a chance to learn something new or increase your scope. Databricks. You want to gain some skills at a large company that has exposure to data and AI. Just don't expect to have a startup experience with any of these companies. There you have it. That's the review of the top 5 companies in the CNBC Disruptor list. More importantly, what do you think? Do you agree? Disagree?